And I want to start by just saying a little bit about the movie and about what we want to discuss today. So the movie is a documentary, I think, maybe Alex will tell us more, about the story of Ada, who is raped 3 times by the same man. And her story is told in a very unique way through a series of characters or people who tell part of her story and then also relate to it in their own way, thereby telling us this great big cultural phenomenon basically, and creating something that is much larger than this one specific story, while at the same time telling a very coherent, I don't know if coherent, but a very specific narrative. And the film takes us through an emotional journey in many ways that is similar, I think, to Ada's journey. It begins by having the viewers a little bit confused, maybe ashamed. Maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more. But this way of walking on the line between Ada's story and the story of the person telling the story creates this feeling that slowly begins to grow into something bigger as the movie progresses. And this is basically what we want to talk about at the panel today, is the way we talk about sexual violence and the way we tell these stories, whether it's in art, in filmmaking, in documentary filmmaking, or in the way we cover these stories in the news. And we want to look at what these stories do today and what they can do when told in a different way, like this film. And that's why I want to start, Alex, by asking you, this film has such a unique way of telling the story, and we were all wondering, how did you come to this concept, this view of having the story told through these differing perspectives all the time, and this unique structure of the movie? Where did it come from? What is it based on?
First, thank you very much for the question, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to speak with you tonight. And I'm very happy the film to be seen in Israel. It was a very long process, maybe because I'm a very slow person, but maybe too because, I am a very slow person. That's, a statement. But it was very slow too because we started to work on the film way before the Me Too movement. And I am very strong. I think of myself as a very strong feminist. And when Ada told me her story, the first question I had was just like, why did she go back to her rapist? And I was so ashamed that, because it's called like victim blaming, of double victimization. I instead of asking myself, why did this guy raped her? I immediately thought about her, her guilt. So it was a beginning because, I started to be a bit obsessed with this story, and I started to speak about it to my friends. And sorry, my answer will be very long. So you can just yell if it's too young and too long, okay? I will try to be quicker. And so I started to speak about this story to my friends. And I was really astonished to discover that many of my female friends told me that a similar story happened to them. And it broke my heart, like completely, because they never told me before. And I was just like, these women are like my sisters and they didn't tell me. It means that they had to live with it like for years. And when I told this story to my male friends, I have to say that my male friends, they are very handsome most of the time, very clever, very educated. They are not monsters, they are not creepy, they don't wait for girls in strange places, in dark streets or with a knife. They are very nice people, very nice men. They told me, if this is a rape, I am a rapist. And I was just like, yes, maybe you are a rapist. because, you know, you never want to think of yourself as a rapist. You know, it's rapist, it's always someone else. But, you know, when you hear that, we say most of the time that 1 woman on 6 was raped, it means that maybe around you, I mean, we can think that 1 man on 6 is a rapist. So it means that, you know, men who raped someone. You have to. I mean, it's like, it's mathematical. It's not me being so. I will come to the answer. Don't worry. Don't. So I thought that it was very hard for people to identify with rape victims, because, I mean, I'm talking about Europe, but in Europe, we live in something called, like, to me, meritocracy. It means that you deserve what you get what you deserve. And no one wants to believe that, no, we don't get what we deserve. No, nobody gets what he or she deserves. And so I thought that I had to find a way to force, in a way, without, I mean, with their consent, but to force people to get into Ada's shoes. So I really believe that reenactment sometimes, you know, can make you feel what, you know, because I wanted to be an actress when I was young, and sometimes you play a role, and even if it's horrible what you did, what you do in the role, because you've learned the words, and you are in this person's feelings, body, I don't know, all of a sudden you start to understand why they acted this way. And so I thought that maybe the best way to play, I mean, to make this film was to ask people to play Ada's role, to be Ada. So then I had to find people who will be able to play Ada's role. And then I wanted them to tell me how this, I mean, what this experience did to them, how it echoed something inside themselves. And I had to find people who had something interesting to say about it. And if I staged this film that way too, I think it's because we were, as I told you, it was way before Me Too, and I was very afraid that if I asked Ada to speak in front of the camera, the reactions of the audience will be very violent and she will suffer again. So I didn't want that. I wanted to protect her. So I asked Ada, for 2 years, I recorded her because I don't know, you know, I don't know if you know, but there is a phenomenon called dissociation. I don't know if you heard about it. When you have a very, I mean, a trauma, it's like if your body, I mean, your mind was removed from your body, because if you stay in your body, I mean, if your mind keeps working, it just, I hope there's not any shrinks in the audience, but to be very, very quick, in order not to die from a heart attack, or in order not to burn your brain with hormones, your mind just stops working. And sometimes people, you know, when they speak about their trauma, the dissociation starts again. So Ada was like that. So when she started to speak about her story, it was just like if the timeline just broke, and I didn't understand. She was saying something that happened like 1 week ago, as if it happened like 10 years ago, and it was very confusing. So I had to record her a lot to understand her story and to understand what it was really to be raped, if one can understand. But and sorry, my life is coming in my daughter. Sorry, excuse me. And this is, you know, this is virtual life. It's And what was I saying? Oh my God. Yeah, so I recorded her and I her to write her story and to write 10 chapters. And I chose the 10 chapters. I'm same things. I mean, the same chapters. And then I started to look for people who, yeah. So I have to say that I paid people to learn the text, but not to speak about their own story. It was a very long answer.
No, but a very, very interesting one. And yeah, it's this thought about trauma and the process, it very much is reflected in the film, and is also why we have Tamar with us today. So I want to take this further, because I think Tamar can help us think about what you just brought to this panel. As you say, trauma plays a very big part in this film, and our ability to process it. And I think Tamar, as a social worker and cultural researcher, can maybe talk to us a little bit about this psychological and cultural effects of the way we tell these stories of sexual violence, and what different ways of talking about sexual violence can bring to our ability to cope with this kind of trauma. So Tamar, please.
Thank you. I start by saying I'm grateful to be here, and I was very emotional watching the movie. I think it's a unique piece of work, and I'm very grateful to have seen it. It's, for me, a movie that can be talked about in so many ways, but I'm going to talk about it tonight as a cultural researcher and a social worker. And the things connect, and they connect in this movie when we think about the ways we, in our culture, perceive and tell the story of sexual assault. And I'm going to argue that what we want to do is shift the perception of sexual assault from stills pictures to movie. And that's partly what the documentary is doing. And also what, if we've been talking about press coverage, it's also what the media and journalism can do and might start to do. But what does it mean to shift from stills perception of sexual assault to a movie perception? So when I lecture and I talk to people, I'm doing workshops, I'm asking them, what do you imagine when I'm saying sexual assault? And most of the times, people are responding with stills pictures. You might have them in your mind as well right now. Do you have the stills picture of a woman walking alone in a dark street at night? Maybe you have the image of a woman shielding her face from being hurt. Many times we have the image of a punch, a male punch. And most of us have the image of a male aggressor holding the hands of a woman, probably in a lying position, in forceful penetration. But sexual assault is not stills. It's not stills pictures. It's a video. It's a movie. So as a movie, sexual assault has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And most of the time, what we know from researching violence interactions, we know usually it begins from the distance. It begins with looking, closing distance, maybe trying to have a conversation, asking questions, having the conversations. Sometimes there's a touch. This is the beginning. In the middle, something changes. We're going to speak about that in a minute. But what happens when we, in the end, that's the actual physical violence. That's the actual sexual violence. That's the rape. So what is this movie? Where can we see it? We can think about what we know. Who are the people that are sexually harassing? Many times, many of the stories we hear are about neighbors, dates, doctors, teachers, the fathers of friends, neighbors. We now know that at least 1 out of 3 women is being harassed or assaulted throughout her life. More than 80% are being violated by a person they know. So let's think about that movie. It would start in a friendly way, wouldn't it? It's a person we know. It would start with a conversation. We're going to smile. We're going to be involved in an interaction that is familiar. It's close. But that's just the beginning. At some point in the middle, this interaction is changing and some kind of boundary is being crossed. It's no longer consensual, but at this point, consent is no longer asked for or given. From this middle point, the interaction is escalating, ending in the end of the movie with the actual rape or physical violence. When I watched the documentary, I listened to all the people reflecting on Ida's story. And if you just listen to them speaking, you can see a movie that they all share. Most of them are speaking about being young, trying to explore identity and sexuality. They're going out, they're meeting people, they're exploring what is closeness, what is relationship, what is love. This is the beginning of the movie. It is consensual, but as we hear in that movie, at some point in the middle, things are shifting. And that is the cultural movie of sexual assault. It's extremely important that we'll do this shift from stills to video. One of the reasons, and maybe almost the most important one, is that the stereotypization of sexual assault is a stills stereotypization. It's the stranger, it's the one in the street, it's the one jumping on a woman. When we think in stills, when we think in that stills picture, sexual assault is also a very short thing, isn't it? But what happens when we go into the movie? It's our family and friends, it's all around us. It's something that we all share. And it's not that crazy rapists. You mentioned it. All of our friends, or at least some of them, might be rapists in some way, if we go with that definition. It's really important to take sexual assault from darkness to light, from stills to movie. It's also extremely important because it validates the stories of women, the testimonies of situations that are not yet rape. We are hearing more and more women talking about what is commonly called the gray areas or sexual assault. So sexual assault is now legally recognized, but what about these gray areas? The boss told me something, it's a bit sexist, it's sexual about my body, it's not yet sexual harassment, but what is it? If we think about the movie, it's the beginning of the movie. So we validate the experience of women experiencing these kind of interactions. They might not be the full movie, but they're part of a movie of sexual assault. And that movie is cultural. It's not individual, it's not psychological, it's cultural. This movie is written and directed by our culture. And you ask sometimes, why did he do it? I mean, he's not a psychopath rapist, so why did he do it? Well, he did it because we raised him to do that. We raised him to identify masculinity and his value as a man with sexual interactions, with erections, with orgasms, with the amount of women men sleep with. We raise men many times to look at women as objects, to sexualize them, especially in a sexual interaction. We ask about women sometimes, well, why didn't she stop it? We didn't raise her to stop it. We raised her to be nice and beautiful and quiet. We raised her to give priority to the needs and desires of others, like one of the women in the documentary very well defined. We raise girls to be submissive. all through in all interactions in life, but maybe more than ever in these kind of interactions with men that are so boundary crossing. And I don't want to say that people are responsible for that. It's uncontrolled, it's unaware, it's our culture educating us to do something. But that is why it's incredibly important that we'll have more information, written or visual, about how these movies are performed step by step, stage after stage. It's the only thing that can help us as a society, as a culture, to see the movie, deconstruct it, critically look at the roles and the stages of that sexual assault movie, hopefully reconstruct. So we can hopefully, to erase these movies from our culture, but on the way there, how can we stop the movie? Stop it early on, stop it in the beginning, in the middle. How can we change the roles? It's really important that movies as this documentary and other media representation, other exposés and press coverage will show us the details and the full movie. And what I really liked about the creative choices in the documentary was that we have no idea about the names of the people speaking. We don't know which story is the original story or the stories that are connected to that story. That's a brilliant choice, I thought, because this is not their story. It's not a story of one individual. It's not a story of one name. It's not a story of some man who's psychologically damaged or a woman who's psychologically damaged. This is the story of our society. It's the story of our culture. We don't need to name it. We don't need to give people names. This is our story. So on the one level, this switch from stills to video is helping us as a society to deal with the phenomenon of gender-based violence. At the same time, when we go into the mechanism of trauma, it has also implications. So in the DSM or in the diagnosis world, traumatic event is an event that is outside of the range of normal experiences. It's really important because the range of normal experiences, that's not something nature created. We as a society created. So right now, sexual assault is an event that creates trauma and post-traumatic stress. But what will happen if we as a society validate that movie of sexual assault more and more? Some of the events that are now traumatic would be more validated. We'll know about them more, we'll hear about them. We'll see them in movies, we'll hear about them in the newspaper, we'll see them on TV, and we'll see them as a sexual assault movie. They will not be accepted by society. They will be unnormative. So I'm not saying that if in the future women would not be traumatized if they'll be in this situation, but it might be a different kind of intensity of trauma. But maybe the most important thing that this shift from stills to video can do in the trauma department is the healing process. So part of what post-traumatic stress disorder does, part of what traumatic events do, is creating a memory that is not chronological. There's no one story. So the memory is with frictions, right? We heard it in the documentary. You remember maybe colors or smells or noises. You can't remember the entire story. But the post-traumatic brain craves for that in a way. We want to know what happened. We want to have our memory back. We want to have those parts of ourselves back. But what if we live in a society, in a culture that talks freely about these experiences of sexual assault? What if it will help us talk about it more freely, ask for support? What if the society around us will be able to give us validation and support to talk about this kind of movie? Would it help our memory reconstruct faster, earlier? Would it help us feel less guilty, less filled with shame, to hide it less? Because everyone around us would say, we know this happened to you. You're right, it happened to you. You're not imagining, you're not overreacting. That was rape. Exactly the stories we've seen in the documentary. That was rape, we're supporting you. That might have a very big influence on the healing process from trauma. And it might also, hopefully, have some kind of effect on our police system and our court system and our educational system. There's a lot of potential here, I think, to shift this perception from stills to video. And I think the documentary really helps to do that, as I think that journalism can do that, and media can do that. And of course, our conversations can do that.
Thank you so much, Tamar. It's such an interesting perspective, I think. And I want to go back to Aleks for a little bit to hear how much of, Tamar mentioned at the end of her talk about this cultural aspect of this phenomenon and the fact that it's a societal story and the fact that it's something that is embedded in our society, in our structures, in police, in education. And that is something that is very present in the film as it goes on. Like you said, you had these 10 chapters and you can see that some of them are these interactions with the systems around. And I was wondering how much you thought when creating this artistic film, you thought of in these political terms of there's this structure of the current system and I want to create something else. I want to think in a feminist way. Like you said, it was before Me Too. So I'm wondering, how much of it was there is an important story to tell and I want to tell it in an interesting way. But was there also some thought about there is a change I want to see, a systematic change, or there is something about bringing justice, bringing these stories to light, whether that was part of the thinking or if it was something that maybe later on you kind of looked and said, actually, this is something I see in the materials I have.
No, I mean, I think I've always everything you do, everything you say is political. No, I'm not the first one to say it, but like intimacy is very political. So filmmaking is very political too, even if I try to be not political, I would be very political anyway. So yeah, as Tamar said, to me, rape is not about individuals. It's a global history. It's a political history. And if men think that it's okay to rape someone, and it's okay, for example, to rape their girlfriends or boyfriends or wives or I don't know. It's just because they are raised to believe it's okay. And so I wanted to show, when I made the film, I think I didn't think the film will not have any success, because when I started to work on it, people would say things like, when I started to go in, to try to find money to make the film, people would tell me, maybe you should make a film about a real rape and things like that. So I thought that the film would not be seen. And I thought that if I was alone, so I thought that I would make the film for my sisters and my girlfriends. And yeah, to me it was very important in the film to speak, for example, about the police. That's why maybe I will now speak about who is in the film. 3 of my best friends are playing in the film. But when I started to, at first I thought I would only ask actresses to be in the film. But I realized when I started to shoot that many of them, they really didn't know what sexual assaults were. So they had a lot of stereotypes. And I thought it was very interesting to start from these stereotypes, but I wanted the film to go further. And that's why I started to look for people who will have something else to say about rape, like policemen, policewomen, lawyers, judges, I don't know, shrinks, nurses, doctors, sociologists, linguists, anyway, many people. And I thought it was very interesting because they had another point of view about what rape is. For example, the lady who speaks about you know, when Ada lodges a complaint, she's a cop, and she was raped 2 times. And I thought it was very interesting because, you know, she's a bit, you know, she's not what you could call a beauty. And, you know, sometimes people have this, you know, these stereotypes that you are raped only if you are like between 20 and 25 and you're very gorgeous. But, you know, I met women who were raped when they were like 85. So, yeah, so the film, I wanted to speak about that because sometimes people think that you lodge a complaint and then, you know, your life is great because, you know, you said something that was very important for you in front of the society. But, you know, policemen and policewomen, they are part of our society, and they are raised as we are in what we call the culture of rape. So it means that very often when you, I mean, at least in France and in Belgium, when you lodge a complaint, most of the time, it's even worse than before, because there is no one to listen to you, really. And people will say, you know, like terrible things like, why did you go there? Why did you go there dressed like that? You know, you knew what would happen. So it's very, very hard. And something very political too, I mean, to me in the film, and something I really like something that was important for me in the film. When I started to make essays for the film, my God, I think I speak English like in French we say like a Spanish cow. And really, I hope you understand what I say, because
we understand.
Anyway, when I started to work on the film, I asked many people, different people to play Ada's role. And I realized that when a man plays Ada's role, when an old woman, or when a Black woman, when an Asian woman plays Ada's role, I mean, I didn't listen to them. The images that came to me were not the same. And I thought, oh my gosh, you know, I thought I was very feminist. I thought I was very leftist. And I thought I disconstructed a lot, but no. Because when a Black woman says a story and when a white woman says a story, I don't hear the same thing, which means that I have a lot of stereotypes to disconstruct still. You know, many people, for example, in the film, they realize that the same text is said twice, once by a man and once by a woman. And some people, they don't even realize it, because to them, it's not the same story when it happens to a man and when it happens to a woman. And it's very, I was really astonished to, you know, because sometimes many people told me, you know, that they were very shocked by the first guy who says that he raped his girlfriend. But when the gay guy says that he raped his boyfriend, it's just like normal, you know, because, you know, the stereotypes we have about gay people, you know, their sexuality may be a bit, you know, weird or something. So if they rape each other, it's like normal, you know. So to me, that in this way, the film is very political. And I don't know if a movie can change something. I mean, I hope so, but I hope so. But I was very surprised and very happy because after seeing the movie, many men came to me to tell me that they gave a few calls after the movie to check if the girlfriends they had when they were like 20 were okay. So I thought, oh my God, if only one man just realized that maybe once he raped someone, it's just the beginning of something that to me is great. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, you did. You definitely did. And I think it's a huge impact. And I think this change that we're seeing since Me Too is making a small impact in some ways. And that is also why I want to turn to Avelkilesh now. Because she is a reporter for The Readeress, and she was involved in our project about women in the media, and specifically about the way sexual violence is covered in Israeli media. And I think a lot of what Alex was talking about regarding what is happening in Europe is very, very similar to what we know is happening here. So I'm wondering, Avelkilesh, if you can tell us a little bit of background about how the news coverage of sexual violence has changed, if it changed, what we can see in that conversation and how it relates to this film and this things that we've been talking about.
Hi everyone. Hi Alex. I'll start by saying that really the movie it really shook me up. And I wasn't expected to have that kind of emotions, really disturbing emotions. I was just all the time wondering, you know, why she's doing what she's doing. And really that took me to really serious thinking of what is rape and how even us as a woman experience it and how we can be judgmental towards other women. Saying that, getting back to Maya's question, so in the last few months in Politically, we were working on our final year project regarding the presence of women in the Israeli media. And we attacked the issue from a couple points. And one of the aspects that we examined was how news media, how the journalism are covering and reporting cases of violence against women. And we looked back until like 5-10 years ago, and we saw some really interesting and positive changes. And that's that in the recent years, when the media is covering a story, they're not focusing on, you know, the religious aspect or the ethnical aspect of the victim and the attacker, which help to emphasize the, you know, the universality of the phenomenon. In the past, the focus was, oh, that a religious, you know, from Muslimic religion is doing X, Y, Z, that's, you know, killing women, that's a problem of a specific society, ethnicity, and group. And now when the traditional media is covering violence cases against women, you can see by the way they address the case by sharing past information regarding similar cases of violence against women. As a reader, you can see that it's a universal problem. It's a society problem and not a problem for just a specific part of the society. And in that aspect, I can say that it's a transformation from really, as Tamara said, you know, a stills picture to more a video one, while alternative news media such Politically and others are really ahead and leading by forcing us, the people, the viewer, the readers, by presenting and showing cases of violence and sexual against women, the cases where bad things happen in a normative situation when you're on a date or at a party or just eating dinner with a friend of a friend. In those cases where, the attacker, it's not a monster, it's someone rather, familiar, someone that you trust in a way. And when Politically Correct publish this kind of assault cases, there's so much, media noise around it because it confronts you with this liquid situation where rape, it's liquid, it's not something defined, you know that something bad is happening, but you can't really define it. And that's motions that we, our society, are really, struggle to understand, because it's forced us actually to deal with the most delicate layer of our society that, that our society and the way the society are structured force us, enable us to experience these bad things in a normal, environment and situation. And what the alternative media as Politically is doing is always making sure that, we will hear those cases where, the bad, it's not completely bad, someone that that you trust. And more focusing on those cases to, I think, as a society, as a newspaper and Politically Correct, what we're trying to do is, is saying we want to deal with the fundamental, things that create a place where you're supposed to be a safe environment, a safe relationship, but due to those, gender differences and gender behavioral that, men are set to act in one way and women are set to act in another way, that allow that battle of power being really dominated and being controlled by, by an old definitions that are no longer relevant to our society and to where we want to be.
Thank you so much, Avelkilesh. I think one of the things Avelkilesh is pointing towards is really this slow shift that we're seeing, that telling these stories and telling more and more of these stories, and since Me Too, but also by alternative media and by documentaries such as this, is always trying to broaden the conversation and bring more voices and normalize this thing. I was wondering how you see the effect. Actually, we have a question here from one of our attendees, so maybe I will take this question, and then if we have time, I will ask my question as well. So one of our attendants has asked, "Thank you for this extraordinary film and for challenging our stereotypes and judgment. It is super interesting to hear you talk about the film, and I share your hopes that it could make a change. One obstacle might be that realizing you might have raped someone leads to immediate shame and denial. How do you think we can change the discourse and help people take responsibility?" It's a very good question. So thank you, anonymous attendee. And if you have more questions, please send them to us. Alex, I think it is for you, of course.
Not only for me, but it's really
an easy question for you.
It's a very good question indeed. I don't think that, I think, how to say, I think that Me Too was great, is still great, and really I thank God that I was on this earth when it happened. But I think the next step now is to try to include men in the discussion. I want to know what they think about it, and I want them to be able to speak about it freely. Because if only women make the move, you know, we are only half of the population. We are only, in a way, half of the problem, if I can speak. So I mean, in this way. So we have to let them speak and to understand what is happening. It doesn't mean that we have to forgive them or we have to say it's okay, but we have to give them, yeah, a way to be different, a way to act different, a way to heal something, if something can be healed. But I don't believe that throwing someone in prison would make any good change. I mean, so this is a huge problem now, because I think we have to imagine a way to enable men to speak without just forgiving them. Maybe we should forgive them. I don't know, or we could forgive them. Yeah, we could forgive them. But yeah, it's now I think it's the very big challenge we have to face, because we haven't invented anything yet that it's satisfying me. I don't know, Tamar, maybe you have something more interesting to say about it, but you know, for example, in the film, it was very, very hard to choose to put men. If I could have, I think I would have like half of the men, half of the protagonists would be men, but it was so hard to find men who will agree to speak about it. And I know that the reactions of the audience were very hard for them. And so they were quite courageous to, and it was very hard for me because I don't want to it was my aim was not to say that they were heroes, you know. So it's very hard to find a way to listen to them without saying that, you know, it's so great that they raped someone, now they are very courageous to say it. So it's very edgy, but yeah, but it's very, yeah, it's really a need we have now to find something.
Definitely, I think it's a very specific place we are in a historic moment. What you're saying, I think is very true, and we don't really have the tools. What are you saying? Ah, okay.
No, I'm just saying. For example, now, you know, I don't know, in the French cinema, many very famous actors are accused to be rapists. And all of them, I mean, many writers, many politicians, and all of them, they say, I know, I don't do anything. You know, she's a liar. And I hope that one day I will hear someone say, I am so sorry for what I did. I am really sorry for what I did. You know, I think if someone say that, I think the first one I will cry, really. Because I'm really, please stop denying this woman. Really, they have to become aware of what they did.
It's an interesting point. It very much reflects an investigative report we had just this week that had a lot of impact in Israel, focusing on an actor who did admit and did take responsibility in a way. And I think it leads to an even further question of what do we think should happen? And very much is the problem of we do not have a court system we trust. We do not have someone to tell us, let's do this, let's do that. So I don't, but we have another question from Yael Flores who said, what do you think about the impact of social media? Think about these issues, and I would love Tamar or Avekilish maybe to also answer if they have questions, if they have thoughts on the issue. Tamar?
I think actually social media is touching also the change of narrative, but also, Alex, what you just commented on. So on the one hand, social media is a huge platform to do this shift from stills to movies. And I've looked, read and listened to so many brave women actually telling the stories of these movies, and it's always mind-blowing in a way, and you can see it in the responses either of other women who get the validation to say it happened to me as well. And okay, if you say it's not okay, I can dare to say something similar. And also there are many responses from men saying, now that I can read it 1 minute after the other from your experience, I have a different perspective on our role as men or my personal experience. At the same time, social media is a platform for negotiating this role of men, this very complicated role of men that our discourse is enforcing right now. So on the one hand, it allows more awareness. It allows men to be held responsible. It allows men to listen, because any kind of change would have to start by men listening, right? So social media helps that. At the same time, social media is also the platform for the victims. And it's incredibly important for that platform to be one that victims can voice their voice. I'm not sure that that platform right now is capable of containing the different processes of the victims and the aggressors. And I'm not sure we know exactly how to navigate it, either as operators of social media or as individual participants. Can we give room only to the voices of women and not allow men to have their kind of negotiation and change process and their voices expressed in social media? If we want to do that, how can we allow men to do this negotiation? Because they have some processes we expect them to do. They might also want to do them, but where? They start by listening to us, hopefully. It raises awareness, hopefully. It leads to a desire to change, maybe, but change always happens when we have not just the individual motivation, but the support of the environment. So where would that environment be, especially because social media is now our to-go environment? And I think in this sense, we are maybe in the beginning of the process of trying to understand where to have which kind of discussion, while still allowing men to have change processes, and at the same time protecting our desire to continue being a platform for the stories of the victims. How we can manage to do it, I don't know yet, but I hope we can find a way in the next few years. I think it would be critical for any kind of change.
Thank you very much, Tamar. I think I will then go back to unless Avekilash, do you maybe have something to add about this issue?
Yeah, I will say that I think the place and the role that social media is playing is that, regarding sexual assault and harassment towards women, the traditional media is focusing basically and mainly about, the drastic situations of attacker, assaulting you at night in a corner, a husband killing his wife, that's, the stories that sell newspaper. And what social media done is that we are hearing those, ordinary assault stories that happen while we're living our life at work, while you're sitting on the bus, while you're out dancing with your friends, giving us those stories, more common stories that are maybe they're not worth to be written on or published on a newspaper, but they are worthy for every woman that is experiencing that. And I think that's the power of social media, talking about not the unusual cases, but the usual things, the common things that women are experiencing regarding sexual assaultment and violence. So that's the strength of social media, talking about real life.
Thank you very much, Avekilash. So we only have a couple of minutes left. So I would like to ask if you have any last thoughts. Maybe I can say my last question, but Alex, you don't have to answer it if you have something else to say. The last question that I still have in my head, even though there are many that we can still discuss, but in order to wrap things up, is really about coming back to the individual change, because there is something very, very strong in the movie, I feel, when you see the different people reading the story over and over again. You touched about this a little bit. And I think that is something that we've all discussed here, and that is true to social media, to the way we cover these stories in the press, and the way we do when we read them and we see people's reaction, is this concept of really reading or listening or being in a story and it having some power and changing you. And I think that is something that is very present in this film. So I was wondering if you had if you saw something very unique during this process, or if you had anything to add about it, or just in general, in closing, before we leave. I'm sorry, there is a cat.
Oh, I thought it was my baby. I would have, much to say, but I think now, the next step, really, for me, is to try to educate myself, as Tamar said, to stop, for example, being polite, to stop being nice. When Ada says, I looked at at the time and I thought in 1 hour I will be gone. The huge question is, why didn't she leave the place before? Because, she was raised up to be polite and nice and not to hurt anyone's feelings, especially if this person is a man. And now I try to educate myself to be, not to be just like a small, very nice little object. And I try to raise my kids, especially my daughter, not to be nice, not to be cute, just to be to be very rude if she needs to. And I hope I will try to raise my son to listen to what the other people say, not to think that his desire is is more important than anyone's desire. And I think too, I mean, to me, so that's something I really want to start to explore, is desire. And you know, when you say we are a lot, I mean, we've been speaking about consent a lot these last years. And when you hear, I mean, consent, if I consent to I don't know, to have dinner with you, it's really means that you you go to this dinner, but you don't really want to, you know, you just consent to go. And I think that now women has to focus on their desire, not on if they consent to give something that maybe they don't really want to give. And I think now, you know, because many men told me, you know, she didn't say no. Okay, just, of course she said no. She said no with her eyes, with her body, with everything. She said no. You know, you don't need to speak to say no. But I think the question is, did she say yes? And now I think that as women and as men too, we have to try to figure out what we desire really, like not what society thinks that we should desire, but what we desire. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Very well said. So thank you very much to all of our panelists. This was a very interesting discussion for me, and I hope for all of our listeners. And thank you very much for everyone viewing. And good night. Yes. Watch the movie. It's streaming until the end of the month on Dokaviv's website. Have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.